Okay, and we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Queers and Soaps. I'm Tommy, and today is another edition of the Abbey Scale. Today we are finishing up season 5, and we're discussing episodes 21 to 25. As always, I'm joined by Lynn
Hey, everybody.
and Eric,
Hi there.
and Eric has a little somebody on his shirt that's joining us today.
Check that out. I want to be a Pollyanna.
So, all right, I'm gonna play a special video. Well, snippet,
Very
and we will
good.
get started. Okay, now we can begin.
There we go.
All right, so episode 21 is called "No Trumpets, No Drums," and I have Olivia says, "How many fathers am I gonna have to go through before you're done?"
Ooh, she's pretty sassy to her mom. She's kind of tired of this. She's definitely upset about losing Gary from her life, but yeah,
Yeah.
she's cold to her mama.
There's definitely a lot of scenes where I'm like, "You're a child and you're talking like an adult to your mother."
Yes.
I love what
Um,
Abby says to her
what does she say?
about the if a man does it, I forget the exact wording of it. I didn't write that, but like if a man does it, it's deemed to be shitty, basically. But if a woman does it, or like it's some along those lines.
Gotcha.
Oh, kind of like the concept, like if a man is bossy, he's a boss, but if a woman does it, she's a bitch,
Right.
kind of
Right.
situation.
Right.
Yes. 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 I like that. Life lesson.
um, Abby seems to think that Gary will come around. Meanwhile, he's in bed with Kathy, showing off his abs.
Right? Yep.
Well,
Indeed.
not in this scene, but later he is showing off his abs.
Of course.
um, my notes are very vague, so you can stop me if I'm jumping too far ahead.
Gotcha.
I have. There's a scene with Ray and Kathy, and he basically calls her nothing but a two-bit whore, and she slaps him, and then he slaps her back, and I don't like that. But
I thought of Tommy right away when that happened. I'm like, here we go with the slapping again of the women. He is not going to be happy here.
it's always so jarring. I'm like, oh, we're doing that
Ray
now.
is
Okay.
definitely a domineering presence and trying to control Kathy. It's
Mhm.
interesting. And at first, it's like, it's controlling Kathy, and then it's more so about the con and wanting money and things of that nature because he's starting to put together what a big fish Gary is and deep pockets for money.
What are you saying,
I'm
Eric?
guessing that's why she was hiding from him earlier in episodes.
Mm-hmm. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. She went to jail to protect him, right?
Correct. Or she took the rap for him or whatever the case was. I'm not sure why she did take the rap, but they definitely alluded to that
Mm-hmm.
and she kept her mouth shut about it. But even when she gets a little bit verbose about trying to stand up to him about it again, he gets rough with her and roughhouses her and tries to be domineering over her that way to keep her in line.
Yeah. Um, Abby gets served with divorce papers, so there goes her whole theory that Gary will come around.
Right. And that happens right in front of Laura, which is perfect timing. Laura is just nothing but a worrywart all these episodes that we watched because she's like fearing either the anvil's going to drop on her or she's going to get blamed for something. That's kind of interesting.
I have
Yeah.
Val takes notes on how to feed all of Ben's plants.
Yes. Well, he's going to go to, I can't remember, El Salvador. She's supposed to
El
be
Salvador.
taking care of his plants. Yeah. And it's like pretty crazy, the whole regimen.
We have a sweet scene. You know I love the Olivia and Gary scenes. We have a sweet scene where she's trying to play piano for him, and she keeps messing up, and she ends
Yes.
up breaking down, and she thinks that he doesn't love her. And it
Yeah.
was a nice, sweet, comforting scene. You
He's
can't-
totally
Yeah.
been a dad figure to her, much like Val's been a mom figure to her, and they feel their hearts are breaking. Gary definitely feels bad that the kids are going through this, but we're seeing it more so from Olivia's viewpoint.
I forgot exactly what he said, but I think he kind of gives her hope by saying they'll try or something.
Right. She's kind of wondering if there's still a chance. And I think, he can't say, well, definitively it's over. So he's being somewhat honest, but she's taking that as huge hope and that there could be a chance that her mom and Gary will get back together.
So meanwhile, next time we see Kathy, she's cutting Gary's hair. And notices he has a pierced ear, and he says it was the 60s. They joke around and start kissing, and Olivia walks in and sees that, and she kind of storms off. They don't see her, but she sees them.
Mm-hmm.
Mac meets with Abby and tells her if she helps him, he will make sure she gets immunity from prosecution, and he'll give her a way to get Gary back, a way back to Gary.
Right.
Laura tells Kathy some hard facts about Gary. Pretty much that about his drinking problem and all his struggles and the whole debacle with Valine and Abby.
Right.
And how they had started something up a few months before he got married. Or a few weeks before he got married.
Right.
She says that he's a binger, and that Abby gave him excitement and Val gave him stability. And Kathy says that she hopes she could give him a little bit of both.
Right. It's kind of interesting. But Kathy, I think, realizes, too, she's not the do-all, end-all for Gary either. She's kind of the distracted side piece.
Yeah. I think she gets caught up in the moment, and she thinks she could be the one.
Right. Right. Well, she's fallen in love with him way quicker than he's even fallen in love with her. And I don't think he's really fallen in love with her. He's just enjoying sex with her, and that's that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Val tells Lily Mae that she's having twins.
Yes, that finally gets put out there.
Abby calls Greg to tell him Mac visited her. She says that if he can get Mark St. Clair to stop pressing her, she may have to expose the Wolfbridge group. He says that he'll have a talk with them.
Yeah, Greg's kind of worried too and wants to hold Abby in place because Greg's accepted a lot of campaign money from the Wolfbridge group, so he doesn't want that to come out about Wolfbridge either. He wants to try and keep that kind of hidden, hence why he stonewalled Mac in his investigation and stuff too, and now he's kind of worried about Abby being such a loose cannon because St. Clair is pushing Abby to get Gary's assets unfrozen, and none of that's happening because Lotus Point has kind of come to a halt on that development because the money from Gary Ewing Enterprises isn't being poured into it like it was once before.
Yep. Gary walks in on Ray roughing Kathy up and chases him around the ranch where they brawl. Gary gets the upper hand and Kathy begs him to stop, and he tells Ray to leave and to never come back.
Which is always going to work out so well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You beat someone and pummel them to death and say, don't ever come back here again. It's like...
He was trying to kill... First of all, the pitchfork. I was having flashbacks of Chip dying.
Chip.
I'm like, what is with these pitchforks?
But I mean, when Ray's doing that around the corner and Gary's walking up and he can sense that he's there, it's like, whoa, that was crazy. He didn't get stabbed, but... Yeah, you're right. Yeah. He was pummeling on Ray, and if Kathy wouldn't have come up and pulled Gary off of him, he probably would have beat him to death.
But even Ray was trying to kill him, and you're just gonna be like, just get off and don't come back. What?
I know.
Cops.
Exactly.
I have Gary beats the shit out of Ray and dunks him in mud.
Right. And he got beat up pretty bad. His face was pretty wrecked up, and he was pretty ticked about it when he was checking himself out in the mirror and trying to clean himself up.
Olivia decides to go live with Abby because she's mad at Gary for presumably lying to her about there being a chance.
Yeah, first she has her yelling fit at Kathy saying, I know what you're doing and it's not going to work, and kind of storms out of the room after having a hissy fit, but then she resigns to go back and live with her mother because she feels like Gary Gary lied to her. You know what I mean? And there is no chance.
And the last note I have is Val gets a phone call that Ben and a few other reporters' car was hit, and the car was found, but they're missing. And that's how that episode ends.
Yes.
And
So just as Val gets to share her joyous news of she's having twins, all of a sudden now her boyfriend Ben is lost and missing in El Salvador.
poor Val.
Poor
I didn't
Val.
I didn't like when they would. I feel like they've done that more than once. They've sent Ben off. I don't like when they do that.
He must be filming something else.
Did he not have? Was he recurring? Like, did he not have a contract?
No, he was full time. We saw him in the opening credits. But yeah, they're trying to heighten the drama with Val and all the angst that she's going through. Plus, it was a segue that one man in her life disappears, and it was some foreshadowing to what's about to come that we'll be chatting about too. So,
All right. Do you guys have any other notes before we rate the episode?
oh, I think you kind of covered it pretty well.
That's all I got?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
all
wow.
I had too. You did good.
Oh, good. So I rated this a 7.
I rated this a 7 as well.
It didn't really wow me.
I agree.
It was entertaining, but it didn't really wow me.
Right, exactly. Nothing too dynamic happened, but the plot moved forward. We found out about Val's having twins is probably the most exciting stuff. Otherwise, it was really just a lot of Gary's assets are frozen. They need to be unfrozen. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that back and forth. And the scenes
Would
with
anyone do
Gary
it-
and Olivia were good.
What did you give it, Eric? A 7?
Did anyone do it? Did anyone do a drinking game every time someone says St. Clair?
I thought of that actually.
Or Wolfbridge, one or the other.
At least-
Wolfbridge or St.
At least
Clair.
50 times.
Yes, there was. I literally thought that at one point. I was like, we should just make a drinking game out of this.
Mhm. Mhm.
I give it a 7 as well. Agreed.
Oh,
Seven
Wow.
across the board.
I think that's the first time we've ever. I wouldn't say it's a low score, but agreed on a lower score than a 10.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
So episode 22 is called Silent Missions. And I have a lot less notes in this. It's more condensed. But
Gotcha.
I have Abby approaches her office with James Westmount to find Gary and his legal team searching her files. She's told to leave and that... I like when I hyphenate Gary Ewing Enterprises to GE.
Right.
Gary Ewing Enterprises is preparing to sue her for fraud, embezzlement, and gross misuse of funds. She tries to plead if they could just go over things together. And Gary doesn't want to hear it. He just storms off. Because that's her saying, well, if we could just go over this, she could lie about every single thing.
Of course. He remembers all that bookkeeping that she did at Not Planning Motors. He doesn't want to hear it.
And she throws around community property one last time.
Oh, yeah. He's going to use that marriage for all it's worth.
Yeah.
Gary sees Mac and tells him about what he found.
Yeah, about the H&O company and how that was what was paying Karen for the apartment complex that Abby and Karen jointly own, and that he knows that Abby's been doing shady things, and he's going to make it right no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Ray is stalking the ranch and Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Lurking behind every bush and every tree, there's Ray trying to check out what's going on.
Not only does Abby ask Laura to try and talk to Gary about unfreezing his assets, but so does Greg.
Yeah. Poor Laura.
Yeah.
She's in between.
And she's like about to
a hard
stroke
place.
out. She's just like, I can't do that.
Completely. And it's like, what muscle does she have that's really going to change Gary's mind? Because she's already pissed him off with some of the things that have been going on with Abby, and he doesn't trust her. I mean, she shows up with like 2 8.5 by 11 pages all the time. And it's like, I found some more papers, Gary. I found some more papers, Gary. Yeah, whatever.
She does try, but he shuts her down.
Yep.
And later on, Greg pays Gary a visit to try and convince him himself.
And at first, Gary's not combative with Greg. He thinks Greg's maybe there for a greater purpose, but then he realizes pretty quickly that not Greg just is trying to get him to fall in line and unfreeze his assets and move forward too. So he must be some way associated with some dirty pool of Wolfbridge as well.
Mm-hmm. I have Val gets a call that 2 of the reporters that were traveling with Ben were found dead.
Yes. And she kind of goes running out of the kitchen and up the stairs with her coping skills lacking. And doesn't she end up calling Gary? And Gary's like, well, just call me even if you just need to talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess I wasn't sure if it was in this episode that started or if it started in the previous one, but they've been having a few, well, first he came to the house at one point
Yeah.
and saw how frantic she was trying to get information on
Yep.
where Ben could be.
Well, Gary found out about Ben, and then he calls her
Yeah.
and says that.
So they've been having a lot of phone call conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So after she finds out this information, she calls Gary. Gary.
Gary.
And he asks her if she's okay to drive. He says he'll come over, but he can't because there's something going on with a hurt horse. He can't leave the ranch. So he tells
Mac
her.
was going to come out and see him too, so he just
Yeah.
wanted to leave.
So Gary asks Val to come to the ranch, and they can talk about what's going on. Matt comes to see Gary, and
And to back it up a little bit too. Also, during one of these phone conversations, Val told Gary, "Oh, did I tell you I'm expecting twins?"
Yeah.
And then she got kind of somber and said, how much she misses Ben and is worried about it. And then Gary says over the phone, "Well, in a way, he's with you because you're carrying his babies." And Val does that on the phone. She wants to tell him so bad, but she holds it back and doesn't tell him.
Yeah.
Where's your babies, Gary?
So we have this long montage of her driving to the ranch or on the ranch.
I mean, she must have been taking the most windy, out-of-the-way road, because I have comments about that when the point time comes. But I was like, yeah, she's driving 2 miles an hour, driving Miss Daisy herself up to the ranch as slow as possible. Doesn't want to hit any bumps because they might hurt the babies. So, yeah, anyhow.
Mac pulls up to the ranch and he goes to talk to Kathy.
Because he's out there to see Gary, but he sees Kathy first, yes.
We see someone's boots, we don't know who it is, with a gun.
Right, someone's walking across the land.
So because Ray's been stalking the ranch, we're assuming it's Ray.
We assume it's Ray, yeah.
And we hear a gunshot.
Right, Mac and Kathy are talking and boom, the gun goes off, Kathy screams.
And then the episode ends with Mac calling Karen to tell her that Gary is dead.
Right. And then they show a shot of Val still driving in her car.
Yeah, just
towards the ranch.
And 5 more hours to go.
I thought that was kind of interesting and funny how they filmed all that and pieced it together. But it was good. This was episode 22. So if Not Slamming had done what they did last season and was the case at the time, they were usually 22 episode seasons, and the season prior was 22. So this could have been technically the season ender. Yes, exactly. Of Max saying to Karen, "Gary's been murdered." Yeah. You know what I mean? And everybody would have been like, "Oh,
yeah."
No, you have to wait all summer to find out. But that wasn't the case.
I almost wonder if maybe it was, and then CBS ordered a couple more episodes.
I wonder the same thing too.
Because now when something's popular, they're like, just add 3 more episodes, and then it messes up.
Exactly.
Whoever wrote it, they have to insert filler stories.
Right?
Yep.
Funny.
That's what it feels like.
So I gave this one a higher rating. I gave it an 8, just based off the ending.
I gave it an 8 too, not to sound like a copycat, but I did give it an 8 based on the ending too. I did enjoy that, how that drama got heightened there.
Yeah, I'll go with an 8 as well.
Nice. Oh, we're all agreeable today.
Again, Mac feels like he's getting there closer with Gary and Wolfridge, and Gary was on the phone with Mac, and that's what made Mac come out there saying how Greg had come to see him, so that's got Mac really thinking, "Oh, I'm getting close." You know what I mean? If Greg's unraveling, coming out there and pressuring Gary to unfreeze his assets, the people that are all dirty pooling this, I've got to be getting close and got people spooked. So he's thinking out there he's going to have this conversation with Gary, and all of a sudden a gunshot goes off and Max calling Karen and saying Gary is dead. Now, as we'll talk about here, that's maybe not the case. So Max had to do some quick thinking, if you will. But yeah.
This and like the whole next episode, I totally forgot any of this happened.
Oh wow!
I mean, I did like when he said Gary's dead, I knew he wasn't, but I forgot that this was like a whole like part of the story, and I was just like,
exactly.
Yeah, I did too. I did too.
Cool.
So episode 23 is called Finishing Touches.
Nice.
Val finally arrives to the ranch.
I mean, no, let's set this up. I have this down in my notes too, and I said, Val arrives, and Max says Gary's dead as they load a body into the ambulance. I said, what the hell took Val so long to get there? Because now the police are already there, the ambulance is there. Again, Val must have taken those windiest road around the valley to get to that damn ranch.
Oh wow, that's right.
They passed her.
That's one thing I've never thought about until I rewatched this, and I'm like, holy freaking shit!
That's
Everybody
true.
got there and Buddy before Val got there.
Maybe
I didn't even think of that.
Me either. Maybe there's two entrances. They took the front express entrance.
Or Val got a coffee or a potty break, and that just wasn't shown on
Yeah.
the screen. I don't know.
Maybe she got out to like take in the nature and like.
But now after saying that and making a little joke there, holy cow, I love Joan Van Ark's reaction to finding out Gary's dead. She just lost her shit. Like she's like screaming and running after it, and Max trying to grab her, and a female cop's trying to grab her, and she kind of just collapses in Max's arms, and it's like she was hollering her head off.
Yeah, like she's the current wife.
Right? Well, because she thinks Ben is dead, and now to lose Gary, the real father of her babies, she's just...
Yeah.
Val's, as we know, 2 steps away from Cuckoos for Cocoa Puffs. We won't get that till next season, but I mean, she's starting to spiral. I'm sure in the back of her mind, she's thinking, if Ben's dead, then I am gonna have to tell Gary the truth, because these babies need a... She probably thinks these babies need a father. Right.
Her and Lily Mae can't raise them on their own.
Oh gosh. God.
Yes, I have. Mac tells Val that Gary's dead. She acts hysterically. Kathy immediately moves off the ranch. She's like, "Oh, he's dead. All right, I guess I don't have a job." She's just like, "That's a bad."
Hi.
We get to see Diana a little bit, like in little like spurts.
Right, she's like with her mom in the kitchen, maybe alluding that she's gonna go help take care of Abby and the kids now that they found out that Gary is dead, and then Diana has that scene with Kathy as Kathy's throwing her suitcase in her Volkswagen Beetle trying to get the hell out of there, and she's like, "Hey, Kathy," and she's kind of being sweet to her, and I'm like, well, this is kind of different from the last time when you were being totally bitchy to her, and like if I looked like CG, I would be too proud of it and be flaunting it. And I'm like,
that's exactly the scene I thought of. I was like,
yeah, but now that she wants to kind of know what happened that day, and Kathy is actually cutting a rug to get out of there because she doesn't want to talk about it, and little do we know, there's a reason why Kathy doesn't want to talk about it, and she just needs to keep her mouth shut.
Kathy goes back to her apartment where she notices the mirror that Ray smashed.
Yes. And all she says is, "Oh, Ray." And it's like, well, yeah.
Like,
the man had a pretty bad temper. Don't
I like the moment.
Bad.
I liked when Kathy and Abby drove past each other. It was like,
oh, that was cool too. Yeah.
Yes. And both the cars stop, and Kathy's like, "You look like you've been crying. Whatever for?" And Abby just yells back at her like, "You bitch."
That was good. That was
Kathy
good.
said, "But this is a cut scene." Well, I had him too. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
The next line I have is same homicide detective, same coroner.
Yes.
From the CG murder.
Exactly. They keep pulling him
Detective
back.
Morrison.
Even he had a good line when he stepped on the ranch and he goes, "I knew sooner or later I'd be back on this ranch again." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
There was even like a little combative scene with him and Diana. Diana does not like him.
Oh,
She was like,
God.
"What are you doing here? Like, can't you just like?" was
Bitchy
like,
Diana turned back on.
I was like, oh, that was a fun little beat that they played.
Right?
Yeah.
I have Olivia has a meltdown in the rowboat. I remembered that scene.
I mean,
Oh,
it's kind of
yeah.
crazy when she like is standing up and she's like, Olivia, sit down. Ah! Abby's got to jump in and save her.
Yeah.
God.
So Kathy goes to Laura's for dinner, and all of a sudden, I just feel like they're trying to like make it seem like these two are close. And all season, they really have not had the CG Laura relationship where they would hang out.
Mm-mm.
No.
I feel like this came out of nowhere.
You're right, and I think what they used it is for a plot purpose. As much as Laura maybe tried to soften to Kathy and befriend her, at the same time, Laura was like eavesdropping around every corner of these 5 episodes, and she was listening to any private conversations that Kathy was having on the phone and things of that nature too.
I feel like all season, like leading. First, there was just her side eyeing her because she looked like CG, and then she would just kind of be like, "What are you doing, Gary?" Like, I feel like until the previous episode where she kind of told him about like how Gary acts, that they really didn't have one-on-one scenes together. And now she's coming over for dinner, sleeping over. Like, what?
Well, and didn't the detective that's back on the scene again come to Laura's to get Kathy and say, we got to take you downtown. We got more questions. And, you know, you're a felon and blah, blah, blah. And then it comes out that Kathy killed someone. Laura's kind of freaked out by that. And off she goes running to Greg. And she's like, well, Kathy's killed someone and blah, blah, blah. Greg, what's going on? I mean, Laura is pumping Greg all the time. And Greg is just like, oh, I don't know. He is trying to play dumb time to time. And Laura just keeps coming back.
I love Greg's reactions to things.
Because he never really fully answers it. He just scoots around it all the time. And then usually just walks out of the room and has no qualms about it.
Or he's just like, don't worry about it, just calm down, it'll be handled.
Right,
like,
exactly.
You're supposed to take his word for it.
What does one thing have to do with the other? It's kind of his favorite line that he likes to deliver.
We see Ben alive but injured.
Yes.
Yay!
In El Salvador, he's laying in some hospital bed with some nuns who are taking care of all these injured people.
I have Val. Val goes to see Abby, and she tells her that she shares her pain, and that
this was a
triggers
good scene.
Abby.
This was a good scene because what is up with Abby? She's like, she's got guilt over what happened to Gary, but yet she again doesn't want to share Gary with Val. But yet Abby, I think, is feeling guilt because she stole Gary away from Val. So she doesn't want Val's sympathy, I think, is really what it boils down to. So she gets gruff with her and instead puts on a tough facade. And she's like, you have no right to share my pain. He meant nothing to you. When she said that, I was like, whoa, that was pretty cold. And Val stands up, and Abby looks at that bloated belly of Val's, and you know exactly what she's thinking. She's like, are those Gary's babies? And it's like, yeah.
And she makes the point of saying, I'm his widow, not you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, Val tried to be peacemaker and have a little come to Jesus moment, but Abby wasn't having it, so off she leaves from the room.
Everyone gathers at the ranch for Gary's funeral. Karen and Abby share a kind moment, I wrote, where Karen says, you know, we're family, I'll be here for you, whatever you need, with the kids and everything. So that was nice to kind of see them.
Yeah, they did have a sweet moment.
Yeah.
She's like, Diana's been a great help, and she's like, she loves her Aunt Abby, and she's like, she loves her mother too. So that was kind of a softened moment.
That'll never happen again.
Right. I mean, it is far too.
Laura tells Val why Gary stood her up at the coffee shop that day.
Yeah, Laura's kind of having to confess that she was the troublemaker on some of that stuff. I feel like she had a scene with Gary about that too before his shooting, and kind of confessing that she kind of intervened a little bit too.
And she basically says that he didn't marry Abby because he loved her. He married Abby because he loves you.
Right. And so he was trying to save Val, basically.
Past tense.
Right. And, you know, Val's like, and she hugs Laura, and I'm like, oh, Val.
She just needs to know that she was, the winner.
It is funny that everybody and Buddy is at this funeral, except for any of the Ewings from Dallas.
Yes, I did think of that. I was like, nobody called Lily, not Lily May, Miss Ellie.
Right? Not even
Well, that
Lily
comes
May
into
called
play
Miss
later.
Ellie. Yeah. Funny.
Like, that was on the news and in the papers. Like,
Yeah,
would've
right.
called. Abby starts to talk to Mac, but notices Mark Sinclair and stops herself.
Yeah, he's standing over by his limo, and she's like, "Is that deal still offer to talk?" And he's like, "Yes." And then she sees him, and she's like, "Well, good. I'll think about it and let you know." And off she goes because they want to start the funeral services. Mac's like, "That can wait." And the funeral director or minister pulls her off right away.
So the funeral starts, and we kind of get like a flash of everybody's reactions, faces.
Well, they're all thinking about Gary. Like Abby's thinking about Gary, Val's thinking about Gary, and so we're seeing his face flash on screen too.
Abby notices Mark Sinclair leaving, obviously content that Gary's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And we see flashes of Gary, and at first we don't know if it's just like a memory that they're having or they're just thinking about him.
Right.
And then as the camera pulls away, we see that he's in a holding cell or a room.
Right.
And Kathy enters, and he's alive.
The detective lets her in,
Yeah. And they kiss, and that's how the episode ends.
I know, that was kind of a good twist. They waited that whole episode to reveal that Gary is still alive. So we're like, piecing things together as the audience right away. It was also sweet, too, at the funeral, and when they showed like a flash of Gary and Val's like looking down and weepy, too. And Karen and Lily May are on either side of Val, and Karen's there holding Val's hand, but then even Lily May starts crying and she reaches and grabs Val's other hand because Lily May's been really terrible about Gary and being verbose about it to Val, and now she feels really bad that she sees her daughter in so much pain that she's not lost one but two men in her life so quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
So you guys got anything else for this?
Well, when, like you said earlier, Tommy, with the mirror, when Kathy went and looked in the mirror, she said, "Oh, Ray." Remember that? Which kind of was like, that's what made me think. I'm like, well, it does kind of make it look like Ray is the dead one at that point.
Oh, see, I just took it as her having sympathy for him being in pain, and because that's the cycle of a toxic relationship, You take the abuse, but you keep circling back, and I was like, really? She feels bad for him?
I think it was because she knew he was dead and Gary was alive.
Which is why she may have been so quick to emotionlessly move off the ranch. I never thought about that.
Well, I think she's trying to cover, and she doesn't want to have to be there and ask too many questions, because even before the funeral service started, 3 other ranch hands who are nameless and we've never really seen go up and talk to Kathy and say, "Hey, Kathy, we're all really sad about Gary. We just can't believe this happened." And she's like, "Thanks, guys. We'll talk more later." And she kind of pushes them away because Kathy doesn't want to spill the beans. Gary's not dead. It's my ex-husband, Ray. But she's trying to avoid. So she doesn't want to talk to Diana, who's got questions. She doesn't want to say too much to Laura when Laura starts asking questions. So she's trying to avoid. So she's kind of guilt-free by omission because she hasn't had to answer those questions and lie about it.
Well, I gave this episode a 10, and Eric's points make me feel good about that, because now I'm like, oh, it deserves a 10.
Nice. Cool. I wasn't quite so generous, but I was impressed. I gave it a 9.
Okay.
So
I go with a 9 as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I was feeling generous.
You feel as generous as you want to. It was a good episode.
I did like the twist, because I was like, yeah, because I didn't remember this whole part of the story.
That's cool.
Okay, so episode 24 is called Yesterday It Rained. I have Ray was the person shot, because they confirmed that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Karen visits Abby and interrupts a meeting with Mark Sinclair and tells her she wants half of Lotus Point, since she basically scammed her out of something, and Gary said he was going to make good on it.
Exactly. And
Right.
she's like, "You're going to make me a very rich lady." And Mark Sinclair's in the other room listening to the two of them have this one-sided discussion because Abby didn't really say too much or say no to Karen because she just doesn't want to reveal her cards too much. But yes, it's pretty interesting. And Mac is surprised that Karen wants to go into business with Abby. And Karen says, it's more so for the sake of, I'm doing this for Gary. Gary would have wanted the land developed properly. I don't trust Abby, so I need to stay close. So I'm going to make sure I can honor Gary's wishes. This kind of thing. Versus Mac is like secretly worried about his wife being too close to what's going on with Wolfbridge's involvement. So he's worried about her safety. But Mac's not telling that because at the same time he's telling Karen, well, I'm not going after Wolfbridge. I'm not doing anything. But meanwhile, he's telling the detective, and now Gary, we need to hold you a little bit longer. And Gary's like, what are you talking about? You said this was only going to be a couple of days. This is hurting a lot of people and blah, blah, blah. And Mac's like, I need 2 more, if not 3 more days, but we're going to get them. You just got to hold tight. You got to let me do my thing.
I mean, I had this thought, and it does come up at some point. Ben brings it up, actually, that, you know, Belle's pregnant. The stress from this could have caused her to lose the babies.
Right.
She was already having complications when she fainted.
Right. Karen has said this, and other people have said this. Gary has said this, too. And Mac's like, Mac's kind of blinded by justice that he wants to get. And so to hell and be damned with other things that are happening and going on. He's playing it really hard and loose and fast to make this hit happen and make Wolfbridge go down. Because now he knows he's got to find a way to prove that Wolfbridge is the one that did the hit on Gary and attempted to murder. And so he's thinking how to catch him again to make sure he's going to have entrapment. Because they've also apprehended a shooter that they believe that did it. They just don't have a confession out of him, and they're trying to intimidate him into a confession. And the shooter's like, you don't have anything. You have no evidence.
Yeah. Ben comes home, so I felt like there was going to be more to him being missing and then being injured, but he just came home.
Yeah, right.
He comes home with his cane and bows to his plants, and from behind he's like, hey, little lady, or whatever. And she turns around and hugs him and is overjoyed that he is alive after all.
Laura comes home and eavesdrops on Kathy on the phone with Ray's mother, telling her about his death.
Yeah.
And she slips away unseen.
Yep. So now she's pieced together Kathy's ex, Ray, is dead. What the heck? And again, she runs tattling to Greg right away about all this. And she's, again, searching for answers. Laura's the one giving all the answers, and Greg gives nothing. Nothing.
So Greg pays a visit to the Mackenzies, and Mac's not home. But he asks Karen through the door, because she has it locked, because she's just talking to him through the crack.
Yeah.
A few questions, like why were any of the Ewings at the funeral? And he kind of questions the fact that Mac was the only one that saw. Yeah. And she's kind of like, what? Why are you asking me these questions?
It's like, that's kind of weird, isn't it? You know what I mean? So he's planting seeds of doubt in Karen's memory.
So she demands to know what he's getting at, and he just leaves.
Yeah, as usual.
Val leaves for her book tour, or to make a few appearances for her new book. As word gets out at the possibility that Gary's alive, he goes missing from his cell.
Right.
And it looks like it's been ransacked.
Yes. Meanwhile, Kathy has told Laura that it looks like Ray is the killer and they're trying to find Ray, but already Laura, who would eavesdrop on Kathy, knows damn well Ray's dead and that Kathy's lying to her.
Yeah. Also, that whole little part that she was in prison for murder. So she's like, what's that about?
Exactly. But again, Mac has got a reaction on his face that he's very surprised to see Gary's cell is ransacked and there's no Gary there. So now the word's getting out that Gary was still alive, but Wolfbridge must have him now.
Yeah.
And that spooks Abby quite a bit, who comes to go yell at Mac about it and finds Karen at home and Mac not there.
Yeah, she confronts Karen about knowing Gary was alive, and Karen realizes Max never stopped trying to bring down the Wolfbridge group.
Right, because Abby even says that. Mac was trying to do what he's always been trying to do, to get Wolfbridge and choose Gary to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't sit well with Karen at all.
So then when Mac comes home, she has a confrontation with Mac. And she says that she can't believe that anything was real between them during their therapy sessions.
Right.
You know, she poured her heart out, and he said that was real, like, that was us. And she's like, how do you separate the two? Like,
yeah.
And she takes off her wedding band and hands it to him, and she says that it's over. And he takes it and he throws it down on a flat surface. And he
kind of spins and falls flat, and then he just walks out the door.
And that's how it ends.
That was a powerful scene. You know what I mean? Again, that's another great Knot scene where they used words and it really heightened the dialogue. Did a lot for as little as it was said, but you could feel the emotion in that scene. I mean, there's the little tear coming out of Karen's eyes, but she didn't fall apart. She just kind of told them, it's over. I can't trust you anymore. I've been asking you for weeks not to go after Wolfbridge, and you've been lying to my face about it. You endangered Val and her babies and lied to all those people that went to mourn Gary. And yeah.
Her stoic reaction to it, at least speaking to him, kind of reminded me of when, before they were married, when Diana walked in on him having that girl in his apartment. She was just very, even though she was hurt and in shock, she was just kind of like, nope, it's done. I can't be with somebody that lies to me. You have to leave.
Right. Yeah.
I gave this one a 9.
I gave this one a 9 as well.
Yeah, I'll go with 9. That's all right.
This next one, we're gonna make Eric answer first.
I just feel with this one, like you said, it was like a lot of filler stuff. Like they did add these episodes in. Like I don't know.
I didn't remember the breakup. I thought the finale, like the end of the season, was just the culmination of all the lies and everything. I didn't remember them having this whole part.
Yeah. I think what they're trying to do is heighten it for the next episode and all the drama that's going on by having Karen and Mac be apart and not sharing information. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I also had the Abby's secretary quit.
Yeah, she
can't handle this. She can't handle it.
The pressure. She feels too intimidated and maybe scared. And so Abby's like, okay, fine, go.
Yeah.
Funny.
I like Mac's secretary, the one that he fired, and then she came back, the older woman.
She's constantly listening, and he chooses his words very carefully around her all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like even those times when Gary was calling.
This shady old nerd.
Well, yeah, even those times when Gary was calling and stuff like that, Mac wouldn't want to have the conversation over the phone because he was scared that she was eavesdropping and all that information was going to go right back to Greg. So he's like, nope. He's like, I'll come see you.
There was a scene that kind of set like alarm bells off in my head. When I think Mac came to Abby's apartment, it may have been when he told her that he was dead. And she left the apartment. And he just like took a seat on her couch, and I guess he called Karen. I don't remember.
Yes, he did. He did
but
call Karen.
He was very vague with what he said, and I'm like, I'm wondering if he's thinking that these phones are tapped, and that's why he's not saying things over the phone. They never
or if he is, you're right. He went and told Abby that Gary was dead, and Abby just picked up her purse and walked out of the room, and she went right to Sumner's hotel suite and just berated him and accused him of basically being the one to point the target at Gary and murdering him. And he's like, you're not calling me a murderer, are you? And Abby's like, I'm calling us murderers. And Laura was in the room, and that was like, whoa, what's going on here? That was a good scene. We should have talked about it. That was really good. And maybe make me change that rating on that episode. But it's not. I'm not going to double back too much. But Matt did say on the phone with the whole bug thing, like you're talking about, he said to Karen, well, I need to go down and identify the body, and then I'll be home. So if it was being tapped, Mac was trying to get the information out there to lay the groundwork, like Gary's dead, The body's
Yeah.
been identified to make Wolfbridge think the hit did go
Yes.
off as they planned.
That's precisely what I thought. Because he, even though he wouldn't say certain things, he did say certain things that if Wolpers was listening, he was doubling down on Gary's dead.
Yep.
I'm gonna go see
Yes.
the body.
Mac was very careful, just like Ben was trying to pump Mac for information too, and he had a whole theory and laid it out. And Mac wouldn't give him the definitive yes that he was going after Wolfbridge and how he had laid his plan out.
Before we get into the finale, I have comments about Ben, actually, and the Wolfbridge group. So Ben has been helping Mac this whole time. And remember Mac's like office got ransacked, he got beat up.
Yes.
How come the family's getting threatened, Abby's getting threatened? How come nobody's going after Ben? He's helping Mac. Have we seen something? Did I miss? Am I not remembering something?
Well,
Ben
you're right,
has not
because
been threatened at all.
Even Laura got intimidated by St. Clair because he made comments about her kids and stuff like that and their ages and stuff. I think Ben's such an outside player of the cul-de-sac that St. Clair and Wolfbridge didn't really hold him accountable. Plus, Ben went out of town to El Salvador, so he was kind of
He did, but he was asking questions. He went to the ranch and asked questions.
I know.
He asked some government officials some questions. Sumner, like, how come? I feel like that's like a loose thread that they didn't really wrap up, and I never really noticed that
I guess
before.
they maybe just treated him like a nosy reporter, and they didn't browbeat him into silence or intimidation. It is kind of unusual that you're right. Ben didn't feel some of those repercussions as well.
I just his sheer connection to Mac, I thought that would have deemed him worthy enough to get beat up or something.
Yeah, I know.
But all right, I guess.
Well, they seem like a really careful group.
Yeah.
Like they can't just go killing everybody.
Well, and they stayed close to that circle of Gary, and even though Ben via Val is close to Gary, he's not on that inside close circle, if you will.
Unless, okay, I just put this together talking about it. The car getting hit in El Salvador was the Wolfbridge group, and they planned to kill him.
You know what? That's an interesting plot point. I'm going to say yes to that. So if the Knots Landing writers didn't make that, I'm going to say yes, that's exactly how it was supposed to go down.
Huh. I didn't even think about it watching it, and I just thought about it now.
Yeah, that sounds right. I didn't think about it either.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, let's do it. I like it.
You win.
All right, so the finale, episode 25. It's called Negotiations.
Here we go, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen.
Val is in New York and is approached by a man that tells her Gary is alive and to expect a phone call from someone named Mark Sinclair with directions on how she could get to him and see him.
Yes, and that she shouldn't mention this conversation to anyone. And she's like, what? You know, all these people are coming at our Knots Landing friends knowing way too much information, you know, and this is just the start of many going on. But yeah, that kind of threw Val because she's heading back to warmer weather, as this man says, and he knows all the stuff, and he just spits out that, great news, Gary's alive. He wants to get in touch with you. You'll be getting a phone call from Mark Sinclair. You know, don't mention this conversation to anybody. And she's just like, what?
Yeah, Mark Sinclair in this whole episode was kind of fluttering around, paying everybody a visit. He even goes to the Mackenzie's house and has a talk with Karen.
Right, and he plants all these ideas of what's going to happen. He foreshadows like 4 different things to her to intimidate her because
that was creepy.
He's like, you really need to get Mac to back down on this stuff. He's like, you need to have lunch with him. I know Diana's supposed to meet you for lunch, but she's not going to make it. And you're going to hear from your brother Joe, and one of your mechanics is going to need to leave early. And he just says all these things. And he's like, if you don't get Mac to stop investigating, there probably won't be a Mac, because basically what he said, it's the final thing. And then he leaves, and she's like, who is this guy, and why is he bamboozling his way into my life and trying to intimidate me?
Yeah. Val questions Ben on who Mark Sinclair is, and he kind of plays dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely dumb.
Mac takes Abby to see Gary, and she hugs him, and he immediately, roughly, pulls away from her.
Yeah,
he's so sick of her and her lies and all
his
this
naked
mess.
torso rejected her, and I'm like, yeah, of course we had shirtless Gary in this scene, and yeah, that was a good scene though, because he was like,
Yeah.
you're in business with this. You might as well have been the one who put the gun in their hands and pointed it at me. And you know, she's like, I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to save you. And he's in disbelief. That was kind of a key scene because he's been so mad at her, and even though she said that, he didn't believe her yet.
So Val goes to see Karen to kind of tell her about the weird thing that happened in New York, and Karen starts talking as if Val knows everything. And she's like, oh, honey, he needs to sit down. And she confirms to Val that Gary is alive.
Right? Yeah, that was good.
And then she thinks that, she says, Ben didn't tell you? And she's like, no, Ben didn't tell me.
Yeah.
Ben knew? How long, when did he know? And she tells that he's known for a while. So then Val confronts Ben for knowing about Gary and not telling her. And this is when, like, his underlying jealousy issues kind of come out. And how he was sad that he was dead, but he was happy he was dead because then he was finally out of their lives, and, like, yeah. And, you know,
Even
and
though when he came back in the last episode, he apologized for being jealous.
yeah.
Right.
Then this happened.
He wasn't being 100% truthful, and then she says, you know, this is no way to start a marriage. And he just kind of looks at her, and she pulls a Karen and takes off the ring and puts it on the coffee table and walks out.
But he agrees. He says, no, it isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I loved how he said to her, he goes, Val, it's written all over your face. You can see the emotion. He knows she's still deeply in love with Gary. And he just, he held back from saying it until that moment because she's been pushing on him too, wanting to know about St. Clair and about Gary being alive and all this type of stuff. So, that was a good scene.
Even when he came back in the last episode, there was a scene where he even brings up that night. But then he doesn't say anything, and she's like, "Why did you bring that up?" And he was like, "Oh, no, and it just came to my mind."
Because he's too scared to say the words.
Yeah,
he's too scared to say the words. You're still in love with Gary. I know you are.
Abby has dinner with Mark St. Clair, and we find out a little bit later she was wearing a wire. She tries unsuccessfully to get him to give more info about Wolfbridge and what.
Because she says you're more than just a lawyer, and the most that he says is,
"I'm more than a lawyer."
More. And that's but then she gives that tape to Mac, and he's like, it's not enough. We need more.
A hit woman spies and reports Gary's whereabouts to Mark St. Clair.
Right, because Abby first was in Mark St. Clair's office, again, laying some groundwork, and then all of a sudden this woman comes in the back of the room. Mark St. Clair excuses himself from meeting with Abby and goes and talks to the woman. We don't hear what we're saying, but we see that same woman later dressed up as a maid. Yep. And he says to Abby, we'll have to conduct the rest of our business later, and kind of poo-poos Abby out. But you're right, now St. Clair's got a person on the inside who goes to the hotel that Gary's being held at by Mac and sees that it's Gary and positively IDs him back to St. Clair saying, yes, Mr. St. Clair, he's in bungalow 8, blah, 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 blah. So now Mark's like, I've got my target this time. We're not going to screw it up the second time. We've identified clearly it's Gary and we know where he's at.
Yeah, and Mac sends Abby back to St. Clair to try and get more info.
Wire and get more detail. And then Mac also tells Abby to tell St. Clair that Gary's going to be in the hotel lobby at 3:30 that day. So Mac's laying the groundwork perfectly for timing that he wants to try and catch St. Clair and the Wolfbridge group on trying a second attempt of murder. And Mac had a meeting with Abby and Gary and together talking about this and making Abby part of the plan. And Gary's like, I don't want her part of this. You're basically putting the gun in her hand. He's like, she's in bed with St. Clair. And Abby's like, shut up. Abby's worried about her own skin. Yeah. And she's worried about losing Lotus Point, but she does during this episode admit that she loves Gary. And Eric, you've talked about that before too. Truly, Abby does love Gary, and we need to hear it a few times to believe it. But I believe it is true.
Right.
She was genuinely relieved when she saw with her own eyes that he was alive.
Yeah, she just loves
Right.
money. She loves money.
She does. She does.
She
does.
tries to
She's
be a
got-
cold bitch, but there's a little heart in there.
She's got
Like the Grinch.
a little attack of conscience that's happening. So you're right. She goes back to St. Clair's office in her yellow polka dotted sweater and says, I think Matt
Polka dot.
set me up. He wants me to be at the lobby at 3:30 at the Belmar Hotel, but I think it's a setup, and I don't want to lose Lotus Point. I mean, these are one of the things that she brings up to him, and he's like, we'll take care of it. And she goes over to leave out the door, and he's got a guardman standing, Lurch is standing in the doorway, and Abby's not going anywhere. And he's like, you're going to stay here, Abby. We're going to go to you're going to go to the Belmar Hotel with me. We're going to make sure this goes
Yeah.
off as planned.
Well,
And then,
I'm watching this and also thinking, okay, well, now he knows that Gary's alive and that Mac is the one that's been doing all this. He knows
Hiding
that
him,
you've been
yep.
going. You know that he's alive,
right?
and that you've been talking to Mac. So now you're a hostage.
hmm Meanwhile, Greg is realizing the jig is up because Sinclair even came to visit Greg at his hotel suite. And again,
Mhm.
Laura was eavesdropping around the corner, time number 472 in these past 5 episodes. And he says, we know where Gary is, and it's all going to go down tomorrow, is basically how he says it. And then
Yeah.
he leaves. And he's telling Greg again to get out of town. And Greg's now made the decision, I need to have a press conference and blow the whistle with the file that he never gave back that Mac had on
Mhm.
the Wolfbridge group, and just say, and he does, he calls a press conference and announces that Wolfbridge has been doing some dirty dealings. They were contributing to my campaign. I had no idea.
No knowledge
but
of
Mac
it, yeah.
McKenzie is the one who put all this together, so I want to congratulate Mac on his exposing of the Wolfbridge group and their dirty dealings, because Greg's naming off thing after thing. But meanwhile, right before he got on the podium, Ben got in front of Greg's face and he's like, what's your part in this? You're guilty. I know you are. And I'm going to go after you. And Greg looks at Ben and goes, well, get in line. And kind of brushes him off.
Yeah. So St. Clair calls Val with specific directions about going to the hotel. There's going to be a car there with keys in the ignition. Sit in the car. When you see Gary, he's going to get in. You're going to start the car and you're going to drive off.
Right. With Mac's car is what
Yes.
he identified it as.
But there's a bomb on the car.
And she, of course, goes, because then he turns around and he calls Karen, and not even a minute later, and Abby's sitting in the room hearing all this, and he's like, Karen, you didn't have dinner with Mac. And she's like, I'm going to try again. And he's like, there's not enough time. She's like, go to the Belmar Hotel within the next half an hour. You need to stop Mac. He's going to be going through the lobby, but there's a bomb in his car.
Yes.
You've got a half an hour. And then he just hangs up. And she's like, wait. And the line's dead. And so Karen hops in her Knots Landing Motors car and heads over to the Belmar Hotel too. Those scenes was filmed so well with how they did the voiceover, playing these phone calls, showing both Val and Karen in each of their cars and hitting the red light and continuing on. And meanwhile, like Abby and St. Clair are now in the limo, also pulling up to the hotel. This scene was choreographed so well. I don't know how the person wrote all this out, as well as the team that probably had to map out all of this, but they did a really, really good job.
Yeah, it was great.
So meanwhile, Mac's putting on the
bulletproof
Kevlar
vest.
vest on Gary to try and have them have a bulletproof vest, because they're getting ready to walk through the lobby at 3:30, and there's that maid in the lobby who clocks her silencer gun and puts a towel over it and sees those two approaching the lobby.
I thought I heard Gary said, "Watch my hair."
He did.
When
He's
he
like, "Watch
did.
the hair."
I'm like, did I hear that right?
I think
But then
that
he
was
didn't.
an improvised thing too,
Yeah, because he didn't smile or anything. I'm like, maybe I heard that wrong.
right? No, you heard it right. It's kind of funny.
You cover the press conference. Karen tries to warn Mac that there's a bomb in his car, but he's rushing out to get to Gary and Val, and Karen tries to stop him, and she ends up getting shot by the hit woman, who...
Because, yes, she runs in and he's like, get out of here. And she's like, you can't go out there. There's a bomb in your car. And Gary looks up and sees that Val's behind the wheel and takes off. And Mac looks around the room and sees that maid draw her gun, and he goes to grab the hit woman's arms and inadvertently turns her, and the gun ironically turns around and shoots his own wife, and she falls to the ground.
Okay, I was laughing when I know it was a serious moment, but so Gary runs to the car and he like rips Valine out, and she's so happy to see him. She goes to kiss his neck, and then he just like runs off when he sees Abby being pushed back into the limo and being driven away. And then she falls to the ground crying.
I know. They're just trying to amp up the drama. They're trying to amp up.
Plus,
there was also a hitman outside that the detective and his colleagues also apprehended too, that was going to try and shoot Gary there as well.
Yeah.
So after...
You think there was a bomb in the car? Because the engine wouldn't turn over when Val tried to start it. And that's what I was wondering. I'm like, did Sinclair just use that as an excuse, or did he actually have a bomb in Mac's car? Or did they just disconnect the battery so Val couldn't start the car in case Gary did make it and they couldn't drive away? You know what I mean?
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe the plan was just to shoot him.
The only scene that I have a little bit of a pick on is you're right, the scene where Gary's holding on to Val. Val's so happy that Gary's alive, and she is kissing his neck, but then he hears Abby screaming, who managed to get partly out of the limo and yell at him, and they pulled her back in, and he pushes Val away, pushes poor pregnant Val down to the ground, and he goes running across the parking lot to try and stop the car, and the car is backing up, and you could clearly see it was a stunt double, because that is one bad wig on that actor that's supposed to look like Gary, and he spins across the cars.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I've watched this too many times that now I've noticed it, and I'm like, I wish that actor would have completely scrolled out of the screen from flipping off the car, but he stayed in view, and you could tell that wasn't the real Gary.
I noticed Abby's hair is long when she's in the limo. I wonder if that'll stay the same.
We'll see what happens next episode.
Yeah.
That was such a great shot, though, of her looking out of the back of the limo, and
with her big blue eyes,
and Gary are running after her, and it's like there's no way they're going to catch her on foot, but off she goes. And I think this is the pivotal moment. I'm glad we're talking about this. It's at this moment that Gary finally realizes Abby does love her and was trying to protect him and save him, because she went this deep in the plan and put her own life at risk to save him. So that's why him, for being so angry at her the past several episodes, he all of a sudden has a big change of heart, and he wants to save his wife.
Yeah. So we go back into the hotel, and the hit woman's being arrested, and Karen is on the floor.
People are still screaming and watching and looking at her.
Yeah, and presumably dead. And Mac is just holding her, saying, Karen.
And he's like, we got them, Karen. I got them, Karen. I got them. And he's like, oh, Karen. And he's realizing the depths that he went to try and make this happen, and finger Wolfbridge for all their dirty dealings, what they've done. And is it the sacrifice of losing and possibly his wife being killed? Let alone he was the one who inadvertently helped turn the gun on her. Yowza. The heavy burden. Wow. The last 10 minutes.
How do they stay together after this?
Yeah, you have to pay attention.
Yeah, for sure.
110%.
So go ahead, Eric. You go first.
Yeah, you go first, Eric.
I'm pretty easy with finales because I usually love a good finale, and I go with a 10 for that.
Okay, Lynn.
I went with a 10 as well.
I also went with the 10, but I wasn't going to, because I was kind of like, I'm so sick of St. Clair. Like, I can't wait to never see this man again. But like you said, the last 10 minutes, I was like, all right, it's a 10.
It builds and it builds and it builds, and the way that, again, it was an umbrella storyline. They did this last season. That was a good thing. It was a great use of characters. Everything kind of culminated together. You know what I mean? It was. The hit was on Gary, and so many other people got put at risk. Well done, Knots Landing and Knots Landing team. I enjoyed it immensely.
And good job with the whole Ben detail of him possibly being killed by, we're going to say, Wolfbridge in El Salvador.
Right? Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
I like the attention to detail this season. I really do. because I feel like we've joked also that like Daniel, the restaurant, like we never saw it again. But Laura actually, she even had a line that she had to sell the restaurant in order to
Right.
like make ends meet.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I like the attention to all the little details.
This was such a good setup. You don't even realize it to bringing on Lotus Point, which is going to become a pretty intricate part of the series. And you just don't really think about it that much, but there's so much being talked about versus the visual of seeing it and understanding it. But rewatching this and realizing all the dirty dealings that were happening to make Lotus Point come about,
Yeah.
it was pretty interesting, and it was a good setup to the direction that Knots wanted to move. Besides it being just middle class, they were also aspiring to do things with their life and build upon that. And, you know, Abby was a big part of that too. But Greg was a good addition. You know, here comes somebody that you're thinking, oh, he's a politician for the people, but it's like he's doing dirty dealings with people that he shouldn't, and he's having regrets about it as well too. So there was a
Yeah,
lot of good characters brought on this season.
I feel like Lotus
Yep.
Point, not to like spoil like further seasons, but I feel like it's around for at least 4 or 5 seasons.
Hmm. Well, a lot of times people refer to the show as the pre-Lotus point of the series and the post-Lotus point
And then
of the
the latter
series.
part of the series, we had the Sumner Group.
Correct, and that's how they do it. They're like the Lotus Points years or the Sumner Group years,
Yeah.
as well as sometimes people say pre-Abby and post-Abby too when they talk.
Yeah,
about
that's true.
it.
Should we grade the season overall?
Ooh, I think that's a great idea.
I haven't always thought of this as like my favorite season. It is one of the better seasons. Like I always go back to seasons 4 through 9. Those are the ones I've watched the most.
Right.
Um,
Are you grading this on a scale of 1 to 10, or you want to do it this way? There was 14 seasons. Do you want to give this a ranking and how you'd watch them? Like, is this season number 1 that you go to first to watch, or is this season number 14 that you'd watch out of all of them? I think that's how you should do it. So that's a lot if you can. I mean, I know you haven't watched all the way through, but I think you can kind of place it knowing what you've watched.
Let's just do the first. Let's just rank them the first 5 seasons.
By the
Let's just
5.
do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good way. That's a good
Yeah.
way to do it. Yeah.
So okay. I guess
So
I'll go
is it
first. So you guys can
meaning like 5 is the best number, or 1 is the best number?
1 is the best number.
Thank you.
Okay. So for me it would be 2 is number 5. 1 is number 4. 3 is number 3. 4 is number 2, and 5 is number 1. Oh, I didn't expect that.
Wow.
Because I feel like I go to season 4 a lot. I guess 5 is number 1.
I think that's pretty good. How did you spit that out so well? I have to sit there and like do the math in my head. I'm actually taking my Apple Pencil and writing this out really quick, because I'm going to be like, okay, that. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe change a little bit on you, but not really too much. Oops, let's do that and this. Okay, I think this season 5 is number 2 on a scale of 1 to 5, versus season 4 is number 1. Season 3 is 3. Season 2 is 5. Season 1 is 4. So I like season 1 better than I like season 2, is what I'm saying. So season 5,
I do too.
Season 5, I give it a 2. Season 4, I give it a 1. I'd probably, if I have 5 seasons to watch, I'd go back and watch season 4 first. And that's just the love of CG coming out of me, basically, is what it is. That season really, watching it as a little tiny kid when it was on CBS back then, that hooked me. And I had watched 1 through 3 kind of sporadically, not dedicated. 4 made me dedicate and watch, and that was really when Knots did up their game and do the shift and realized they were going to go full serial, wrote a Bible, and figured things out for a whole season. So yeah, that's my ratings. 5 was 2, 4 was 1, 3 was 3, season 2 was 5, season 1 was 4.
Your 5, 4, and 3 are the same as mine.
Gotcha. There you go.
I'm the boring one. I love character progression and I love storyline, and I can't rank them out of order. Like I never go back and want to watch like a specific season. I like to watch it from the beginning. And
Got it.
as you guys know, I just restarted as I'm watching season 5. I restarted season 1 because I just love it all. I can't pick that way. One left out.
You've been,
You guys got
plus
it.
and that's okay. That's good. So you're just kind of calling it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're just following it in the order
Yeah.
that it goes.
Yeah.
Very good.
I really like.
I love everything that, like, I love character development. Everything that they do in these soap operas,
Mhm.
I love. Like, I love the tender moments between the characters, just everything, and all together.
Yeah, I love
That's
season
great.
1. I love season 1. I like the
Season
standalone
one's
episodes. I liked, like he said, the character study, pretty much.
Yep.
Pretty much they all got at least 1 or 2 episodes, except for Kenny and Ginger. Ginger got half an episode.
Right.
With her stalker.
Stalker. Yep.
That was creepy. That one.
Season 2 was kind of like an in-between. They were trying to do soapy, but we're still doing standalone. Like, they had some arcs that carried through, but still standalone.
Yeah.
And season 3, early season 3 was kind of that too. But the last 10 episodes, it kind of like spearheaded into the soap with the
Yep.
love triangle, we'll call it, or the affair.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I love the whole show too. I'm with Eric. Like, it's like
It's
But-
one of the constants that Queers and Soaps has definitely been covering on a regular basis, and I think, you know, the fan base is there too, which is always interesting. I mean, look at even someone like Eric. He really is putting on the task because he's watched season 5 as well. He started rewatching from season 1 and 2, and then I think he's watching with a friend, aren't you, Eric? Like, you're on season
12
12
or
or
13.
13 right now, and I'm like, oh my god,
I'm at
you're all over.
I'm at the two-part season finale of season 12 right now. With my
Right?
friend.
Wow.
I mean, good grief. That's a lot, but it's good.
So good.
Yeah, it is.
You're
But I'm
definitely
excited.
gonna have to come on for the later season, like 11 onward, Eric, because I've only seen that through once, so I'm gonna need
Right.
help.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, there's going to be a lot of good stuff in season 6 to come because, man, they keep pushing the drama, and it's so good.
Yes, I was actually thinking, like, trying to remember what happens in season 6, and I was like, ooh, it's a lot of good stuff coming up.
A lot of good stuff.
My main thing I remember is that Abby gets a haircut in the limo.
She does. She gets her little.
That's the
sheep
main
bob.
thing.
Hmm.
That's funny.
So yeah, so I guess St. Clair knows how to do hair in the limo.
He had a little time, so he's like, do you want a haircut?
Right? So funny.
I said it, I'm not just the lawyer.
Well, I
Awesome.
guess back then they didn't think like 4 months later that people would remember her hairstyle
Yeah,
was different. Unless she just did it and didn't say anything. I don't know.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Well, thanks for joining me, guys,
Didn't
all
Linda-
season. Go ahead, Eric, what were you saying?
I'm sorry. Didn't Linda Gray get fired for her hairstyle? Then you might know.
They didn't fire her, but they were kind of ticked. She had her hair had grown out one season super long, and there was a scene that kind of ended with Cliff being in the hospital, and the season picked right up. Like,
Right.
JR was there with Sue Ellen, seeing Cliff, who
She had her
tried to
mullet.
take his life. And she did. When she walked outside the hospital, she still had the same outfit on, but she had like super cropped short hair, and it was like, what? Was there a barber in the hospital that you stopped at and got your hair cut on your way out the door? I don't know. I'm surprised they didn't throw a wig on her, or I'm surprised they didn't like, just try and pull her hair back like she got hot or something like that, and then she went and got it cut or something. It was a bad
Right,
continuum
right.
back then, so who knows?
Because I heard that she got fired, or I read that she got fired, and that Larry Hagman said, "You fire her, you fire me," type of thing.
Oh, I don't remember that,
But I don't know
It did happen back in the time,
I don't-
but who knows?
Right.
That's interesting.
That would have been stupid
anyway, come
because
on.
she was such an integral part of that show. That would have been a huge loss if they would have done that early on, especially
for
over
sure.
haircut. I think that's
Right.
maybe tabloids just trying to sell magazines back then. That's probably what that was.
Yeah. Well,
Funny.
thank you guys for joining me all season long.
Yes.
We definitely
It's been
got through
a
it pretty
fun ride.
quicker than season 4.
Wow.
Because we were doing it like every 2 weeks.
True.
Will all 3 of us return for season 6?
Dun dun dun. Well, one of us ride off in a limo and not be seen from or caught again. You'll have to tune in and find out.
One of us might pull a Ben and go missing in El Salvador for a few
Aw.
episodes.
Funny.
But as always, you can find us on all the socials at Queers and Soaps. And until next time, have a great rest of your weekend, guys. Bye.
Bye.